Hey guys, Aaron here. Today we're going to be replacing a valve spring on a 6.2 liter Ford engine. The particular vehicle that we're working on today is a 2015 Ford F-250. However, these procedures can be used from just about any 6.2 liter Ford motor. Now in this particular case, the motor's running pretty rough and we're going to be using the scanner to diagnose which cylinder has a bad valve spring. Of course, there's two valve covers, one on the passenger, one on the driver's side. So using the scanner is going to help us be able to determine which side of the motor is at fault, so we can pull that valve cover off instead of having to remove the other valve cover, which would be unnecessary. Now the idea is that we're going to be filling the cylinder full of air, so when we remove the valve spring, the valve won't drop into the motor itself. Now moving over to the scanner here, when we pull up the diagnostic trouble codes, because the engine light is on, we're showing cylinder 4, cylinder 3, and cylinder 2 misfiring, which is kind of odd. Doesn't feel like 3 cylinders are misfiring. Just might be a bad interpretation by the computer of what's going on as far as engine rotation. So what you want to do is just go into special tests and select power balance. Any Ford vehicle, you could do a power balance test, and it will basically have you run the engine and it will see which cylinder is and isn't contributing to the overall power of the motor. So I'm going to go ahead and start it up. We're going to run the test. And as you can see here, cylinder number 1 is not contributing as much to the overall power of the engine. Cylinder number 1 down here is notably down. 20% is considered a misfire. So overall, the job isn't that difficult. However, there are some special parts and tools we're going to need to get the job done. Let's go ahead and go over those. Now the tools we're going to be using is a valve spring compressor, 8mm socket and a 1/4 inch extension, a 1/4 inch ratchet, a small pick, and a magnetic pickup tool to pick up the retainers off of the valve spring once we compress the spring itself. If you're working on the driver's side, you'll need some pliers to remove the heater hoses off of the motor to gain access to the valve cover. One vital tool we'll also need is a compression tester kit. What we're going to be doing is using one of the hoses, specifically the hose that threads into your motor, which I believe is this one. What we're going to be doing with this hose is hooking this end up to shop air, and we're going to be filling the cylinder full of compressed air. That way when we remove the valve spring, the valve will remain in place and it won't drop into the cylinder. We'll have to remove the Schrader valve out of this end here, so we're able to fill the cylinder full of air. And using a tool like this will allow us to take out the core, the valve that is inside of the hose. You simply unscrew it, and then when you're done, you can go ahead and screw it back in. Now, as far as parts go, we're going to need, of course, a new valve spring from Ford. These are readily available, not too hard to find. And we're going to need a valve cover gasket because we're going to be removing the valve covers as well. And since we're taking off the valve spring, we might as well replace the valve stem seal, which sits directly underneath it. We're right there. Might as well replace it while we're doing the job. So I'll go ahead and post all of the parts that I'm using and the tools in a link in the description. So if you want to buy the parts online, you can. So on this motor, cylinder number 1 is going to be on the passenger side, so that's the valve cover that we're going to be removing. In order to get to it, we're going to remove the intake, we're going to drain the coolant, and remove the 2 heater hoses. If you're working on the driver's side, it's a little bit easier. You don't have to deal with the heater hoses in your way. Next, let's remove both hoses that attach to the side of the air tube here. Set them aside. All right, now we need to remove these heater hoses from both inlets on the motor and just set the heater hoses aside so we can get the valve cover off. And in order to do that, we need to drain the coolant so the coolant doesn't go everywhere. There is a drain bolt on the bottom driver's side of the radiator. You could just drain out a gallon or so and that should be enough. And after that, let's just remove the spring tension hose clamps on the hoses themselves. All right, after that, we need to remove the camshaft position sensor that goes through the valve cover. Just pinch the back of the connector and pull up on the tab, and that should release it. Now we need to remove all the wiring that's attached to the valve cover. It attaches in several different places. This loom in the back here actually attaches to the very back. It's hard to see. And then the front has a couple different grommets that go inside. Just simply lift up and pull out. And our spark plug wires need to come off as well, just off of the coil. Just twist and pull off. And we could take a bare dikes or a trim removal tool and just pry off the little grommet that attaches to the valve cover. Each spark plug wire is attached at a certain point on the valve cover, and that'll need to be removed. So next, there's a total of 10 bolts that hold the valve cover down. We're going to be removing that with an 8mm socket. Some of the bolts are kind of hard to get to, especially back by the firewall. So if you want to take your inner fender liner out of your wheel well, the bolts are a lot easier to get to through the wheel well. So it's kind of up to you how you want to do it. Okay, so now that we have the valve cover off, we need to verify that the piston for the cylinder that we're working at is at top dead center. And what that's going to do is that's going to prevent the valve from dropping into the cylinder in case something happens to the compressed air that we're adding to the cylinder. So we're going to go ahead and turn over the motor. I have a nice little camera, an inspection camera, that I'm going to stick down the top hole for the spark plug. If you don't have one, no big deal. You can actually remove the bottom spark plugs and you can see the piston through the wheel well. So if you take your wheel liner out, you have a pretty good visual of the bottom spark plugs, and you can see the piston while somebody turns over the motor for you. All right, so the piston is at top dead center. Now we need to go ahead and remove the rocker arms for the intake valves. Our intake valve spring on cylinder number 1 is broken. So in order to take the rocker arm off, we need to take the whole assembly off for all of the intake valves for this side. Okay, now that that's off, it's time to go ahead and remove the valve spring. But before we do that, we need to pressurize our cylinder using our little adapter hose right here. I'm just gonna insert this into the spark plug and connect the air hose to it. Okay. All right, so now that we got our valve spring in, it's time to go ahead and put our rocker arm shaft back on. And we're gonna torque these bolts, all these bolts down to 89 inch-pounds. Once we do 89 inch-pounds, we're gonna do a second pass at 177 inch-pounds. And then after that, we are gonna turn the bolts an additional 60 degrees to torque them down properly. Now where the front timing cover meets the cylinder head, you'll see some old gray RTV silicone. It's a good idea to scrape that off and reapply some silicone to cover the gap in between the head and the timing cover. So our valve cover's on now. We need to go ahead and torque these bolts down to 89 inch-pounds. I'm just gonna get them started with my little power ratchet and then finish them off with the inch-pound wrench. Now, if you took your inner fender out on the passenger side, you could see how much more easily accessible the bolts are for the bottom side of the valve cover here. Driver's side's not bad, but it definitely makes life a lot easier to take this inner fender cover off to get to these bolts. So from here, the only thing left really is to throw the spark plug wires back on, fill the vehicle full of coolant, put our intake back on, and start it up. All right, so now the engine's been running for a few minutes, took it on a test drive, and here's the power balance test that we can run with the scanner. And as you can see, all the cylinders down here are contributing just about the same, which is what you want to see, indicating there are no longer any misfires. So I hope this video has helped you out. If it has, please like and subscribe, and make sure to check out the links in the description for the parts and tools I used during this video. Thanks again as always, guys. See you next time.